Greetings, peace, and blessings be on you. We are in Cordoba, Spain, looking at this magnificent structure, La Mezquita Cathedral. This building was an Islamic center, a mosque for more than 500 years. When Europe had fallen behind, it was through the Mosque of Cordoba that Muslims held the banner of civilization and provided knowledge and education to all of Europe. It was Abdur Rahman I who founded this great Islamic institution in 786 AD and established the Islamic State in Spain. The Islamic State in Spain lasted for more than 3 centuries. The mosque was converted to a church in 1238 AD by King Fernando III. Since then, there have been no visible worshippers of Allah in this building. The Quranic ayahs are still visible on the mihrab, but the hymns of Jesus are heard. The name La Mezquita has remained in the hearts of the Spanish people even today. The mosque influenced their lives for several generations, and they loved it.
Here is the charming and huge Giralda Tower in the city of Sevilla. Do you know that this was a minaret of the Grand Mosque of Sevilla during the Islamic period of Spain? The call for prayer was heard 5 times a day from this minaret till 1248 AD. The mosque was transformed into a church by the Christian conquerors. The Islamic Moroccan art on the Giralda for the first 230 feet from the base is still the life of the tower. Here is Spain's most famous edifice, the Alhambra, which means the Red Palace. Alhambra in Granada, Spain, is the greatest example of Muslim art, like the Taj Mahal in India, a delicate beauty built with superb skill. The Arabic carvings, like There is no conqueror but Allah, proves the immense faith of those people in Islam. During the Islamic period, the Jews and Christians were given the freedom to practice their religion by the Islamic State. They were protected by the laws of the state. They were also given important positions in the government. There was no forced conversion to Islam.
Here is an ayah from the Quran. Let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out, clear from error. Whoever rejects evil and believes in Allah hath grasped the most trustworthy handhold that never breaks. And Allah heareth and knoweth all things. The Christian population of Spain gradually converted to Islam. Within 300 years of Islamic rule, 75% of the Spanish population converted to Islam. Spain was known as Al-Andalus.
In this documentary, I am presenting the story of Spanish Muslims who ruled Spain for 750 years. An American historian called William Durant has written the history books of the whole world. In those books, he has written that the Muslim civilization of Spain was an honor to mankind. The Spanish Muslims set up a platform of scientific inventions, astronomy, agriculture, medical advancements, literature, philosophies, and so on for the future generations. And the future generations of Europe got the benefit from the Spanish Muslim civilization.
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed away when he was 63 years old. It was 632 AD. Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, was elected as the Caliph of the Islamic State. He ruled for 2 years. Then Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, was elected as the Caliph of the rapidly expanding Islamic State. Caliph Umar was also a companion of the Prophet. Muslims at this time were eager to fight and die for the cause of Allah. Many of them were the companions of the Prophet. It was honorable to be a mujahid, a Muslim fighter. Prophet had said, "Nobody who enters paradise likes to go back to the world, even if he got everything on the earth, except a mujahid who wishes to return to the world so that he may be martyred 10 times because of the dignity he receives from Allah." Muslim armies conquered Syria, Iraq in 635 AD. Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, personally went to Jerusalem in 637 AD and completed the conquest of this great city from the Christian Romans. The Muslim armies defeated the Persian Empire and conquered Egypt in 641 AD. The Roman navy was shattered at the Mediterranean coast. The Islamic rules of war were different. The Muslim armies did not kill innocent men, women, and children. They fought against only the enemy soldiers who would engage in the war. The victorious Muslims protected the crops and the buildings and gave full religious freedom to the non-Muslims. Due to the rapid expansion of the Islamic Caliphate, governors were appointed in various locations. Mawiyah of the Umayyad family was appointed as governor of Syria in Damascus by Caliph Umar. Mawiyah was also a companion of the Prophet. Mawiyah's father, Abu Sufyan, had a history of battles against the Prophet. However, he converted to Islam and became a companion of the Prophet. Caliph Umar ruled for 10 years, and Islamic territory expanded significantly during his time. After the conquest of Egypt, Islamic forces were marching into North Africa. On November 3rd, 644 AD, Caliph Umar was assassinated by a Persian in Medina. Uthman, who was also a companion of the Prophet, was now elected as the Caliph, and he ruled for 12 years. During his time, Muslim armies went as far as Tripoli in North Africa. Caliph Uthman, may Allah be pleased with him, was assassinated, and this event triggered internal conflicts, suspicions, and unrest. Hazrat Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, was elected to be the Caliph. He was the son-in-law of the Prophet and the great Islamic scholar. The internal conflicts resulted in the assassination of Hazrat Ali in 661 AD. The 4 caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, may Allah be pleased with them, known as Rashidun Caliphs, demonstrated the power of Islam through their righteous leadership. They followed Quran and Sunnah to the literal meaning, and results were spectacular. The Islamic State had expanded to Iran, Afghanistan in the east, to Azerbaijan in the north, and to Egypt in the west. The momentum that Prophet Muhammad generated through his teachings and practice of Islam spread Islam into these lands within 29 years after his death. Don't you think this was a miracle? After the death of Hazrat Ali, Hazrat Mawiyah became the Caliph of the vast and still expanding territories. His capital now was Damascus. He started a policy of family succession in the Caliphate. However, each successor to the position of the Caliph was voted by the community leaders. The Caliphate, established by Hazrat Mawiyah, is known as Umayyad Caliphate. During the lifetime of Caliph Mawiyah, a Muslim general, Uqba ibn Nafi, marched towards the west, founded the military post city Kairouan in 670 AD, and advanced further, defeating the Byzantine and the local Berber tribes. He finally reached Tangier in 682 AD and erected the flag of Islam there. However, 12 years later, during the time of Caliph Abdul Malik, a large army headed by Hassan ibn Nahman resumed the penetration into the present Morocco, which was called the Maghreb by the Muslim forces at that time. Hassan was successful in eliminating the Byzantines and defeated the Berbers. However, Hassan was replaced by Musa ibn Nusayr in 705 AD. He consolidated the victories of his predecessors. Tangier and the coastline of the present Morocco came under the Caliphate. Inspired by Islam, these skillful warriors conquered North Africa. This conquest was to become one of the most significant milestones in the Islamic history, and the whole idea was to spread the word of Allah.
The Visigoths, or West Goths, after they had sacked Rome in 414 AD, entered Spain as Roman auxiliaries. They were Arian Christians belonging to an early form of Unitarianism. However, they were all converted to Catholicism later. During the 7th century, Spanish Catholic Church persecuted the Jews and forced them to be baptized. A civil war started in Spain, and King Roderick came to power. The oppression prevailed in the Spanish society. Meanwhile, Tariq ibn Ziyad, a general in Musa's army, had the vision to spread Islam in Spain. He would initiate the attack on Spain for the sake of Allah, and said that he will achieve victory in this new land. In 711 AD, Tariq took only 7,000 mujahideen with him. They were all eager to fight and die for the cause of Islam. Tariq sailed from the African coast to Gibraltar with 4 ships. He landed in Gibraltar on April 30th, 711 AD. This is the way it was with all Islamic heroes in those days. Their armies were usually 1/3 the size of the enemy. Their biggest strength was their faith in Allah's help. Their slogans were, "Allah is great, Allah is great. There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." The first squadron seized the Rock of Gibraltar. This beautiful rock with its surrounding waters is one of the most beautiful sights in the world, where the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea converge. The rock was called Jablut Tariq. The people of Gibraltar, even today, after 1,200 years, celebrate the genius of General Tariq, who brought honor to Islamic history. You can still see the Muslim architecture in Gibraltar. The serenity of this place is gripping. Tariq came from that part of the African coast, and the Spanish land is on this side. Perhaps Tariq stood on this great rock and looked towards Spain and saw his dream turning into a reality. When he consolidated the positions, the tiny army sailed towards the Spanish coast and took Algeciras and Cartilla. This beautiful town with its bustling traffic whispers in our ears the dignity of those fearless Muslim soldiers who landed 1,200 years back with their flags and with complete faith in Allah, ready to fight. Algeciras is a charming city indeed. King Roderick gathered a large army of Goths, over 70,000, to crush the Muslim army headed by Tariq. For a while, Tariq's soldiers were frightened, but Tariq, a determined Muslim, full of faith in Allah and His Messenger, shouted at them, "Brothers, do not forget that you have come here to spread the word of Allah and His Messenger Muhammad. Peace be upon him. It is our commitment to fight for Islam. Allah is with us. The large number of enemy soldiers do not mean anything. You have ocean to your back. You can sail back and turn away from Allah, or you have an opportunity to enter paradise if you die fighting here. If you live in victory, you have the great opportunity to spread Islam in this land." The two armies swung into action on Sunday the 18th of July, 711 AD, at the Honda Lagoon by the mouth of the Barbate River near Cape Trafalgar. The battle lasted a whole week, and prodigies of valor were recorded on both sides. The Christian army finally broke down, and panic seized them. The Muslim army won the war, and the victorious flag of Islam was seen over the battlefield. Roderick was either killed or drowned, or even fled northwards. Once again, the miracle of Islam occurred. A handful of 7,000 to 12,000 soldiers defeated a large army of 70,000 Christian soldiers. This victory opened the doors to the entire country of Spain. The slogans, "Allah is great, Allah is great," were heard all over. The call for prayer was heard. The martyrs were buried with prayers. The flag of Islamic power was erected on the Spanish soil under Umayyad Caliph Walid of Damascus. Most of Tariq's army was from the Berber tribes of North Africa. Next, Tariq marched towards Cordoba and then to Toledo, which was known as the Imperial City. Both cities came under the Islamic rule. The areas of Malaga, Granada were conquered. Tariq went as far as Guadalete. The entire country of Spain was coming under the Islamic rule fast. When the governor of North Africa, Musa, heard the news of Tariq's grand victories in Spain, he himself came to Spain with 18,000 soldiers who were from Yemen and some from Syria. Musa first captured Sevilla, which was the richest and best-built city at that time. Battles were fought around Merida. The Christian citizens of the captured towns lost no properties of their own. Finally, Musa met Tariq in Toledo. The Christian power now had to retire to the north of the Spanish peninsula, to the caves of the peaks of Europe in Asturias. The organized Christian power had been crushed. However, most of the Christian population remained settled at the time of the Muslim conquest and enjoyed their Roman culture with their own laws, churches, courts, judges, bishops, and counts. However, the law of the state was Islamic. The Christians in the south who laid their arms were left in possession of their real estate, but they had to pay the poll tax, known as jizya. The Muslims demonstrated their essential tolerance of Ahl Kitab, which means people of the book. In 713 AD, Spain from north to south came under the Islamic State, ruled by the Umayyad Caliph at Damascus. The Arabs called this country Al-Andalus. For the next 45 years, unfortunately, there were continuous fights and conflicts among the leaders left behind by Tariq and Musa. There had been some 23 governors during this period. Islamic Spain was in need of a capable leader to organize Spain on a sound political basis. Who was that great leader, the hero of Islamic history? That was Abdur Rahman the First. This Islamic hero saved Islamic Spain from disintegration during its early Muslim period. Abdur Rahman, the grandson of the Umayyad Caliph Hisham of Damascus, escaped from Syria when the Abbasids took over the Islamic Caliphate and killed most of his relatives. At 20 years of age, he ran from village to village in disguise. He was full of imagination, hope, and ambition. His mother was a Berber from a Moroccan area. He decided to run towards his mother's homeland with the hope of meeting his relatives who would grant him hospitality and support. For 5 years he wandered around North Africa with dreams of recovery, and he began to feel that his future was in Al-Andalus. There were numerous clients of the Umayyad family who had earned power and wealth through the favors of the Umayyad caliphs. They would be happy to receive and support Abdur Rahman, the grandson of Caliph Hisham. On September 13, 755 AD, he entered Spain. He was greeted by Syrian officers. With his great skill, impressive personality, strong will, and military actions, he succeeded in accomplishing the unification of Muslim Spain. The Battle of Musara in 756 AD assured his rule in Spain. The Umayyad army advanced directly to Cordoba, and Abdur Rahman made this city as his capital. He was to perform his life's work here and make this city an Islamic capital for several centuries to come. His was an Islamic state. He respected the Caliphate of the Abbasid, their capital being Baghdad now. However, Spain became an independent Islamic state and separated from the Caliphate of Baghdad due to the family conflicts between the Umayyads and the Abbasids. Abdur Rahman quickly reformed the judicial system by appointing the magistrate of Cordoba as the chief justice. Gamblings and other immoral practices were stopped. Alcohol was banned. He introduced a very efficient mail service. Coins were maintained in gold, silver, and copper. A dinar had 4.25 grams of gold. When the rest of Europe was short of money, Spain had plenty of coins. Abdur Rahman ruled Spain for approximately 30 years from Cordoba. His greatest accomplishment was the stability of government after removing oppositions. All Muslim leaders were united. His leadership brought an opportunity to develop civilization and propagate Islam. He did not live luxuriously. Abdur Rahman tried to forge a nation out of Arabians, Franks, Slavs, Syrians, Berbers, and Greeks, and out of aristocrats, lawyers, students, scientists, and doctors. In Islamic Spain, one could hear the Islamic call for prayer 5 times a day, the Christian bells and the Jewish trumpets. However, his most glorious construction project was that of the Grand Mosque of Cordoba, which is known as the La Mosquita Cathedral today. There had been a Roman temple originally dedicated to the god Janus, and in the 7th century it became a church dedicated to Saint Vincent. Abdur Rahman bought this church from the Christians for 100,000 gold pieces in 785 AD. Besides the cash, the Amir gave the privileges of repairing their old places of worship and ringing their church bells whenever they wished. The original plan for the mosque was drawn by the Amir himself. The cost to build the mosque in his time was 80,000 dinars, or 100,000 gold doblas. 2 years after he began the construction of this mosque, Abdur Rahman passed away. It was in the year 788 AD. During his rule, he assumed the powers of civil governor and did not challenge the Abbasid caliphs in their religious claims. He encouraged intermarriages between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Mosques appeared in cities like Zaragoza, Elvira, Algeciras, Granada. Meanwhile, the Abbasid Caliph Jafar al-Mansur and his famous grandson Harun al-Rashid sent forces to Spain to overthrow the Amir and join Spain to the Caliphate of Baghdad. This attempt of Baghdad totally failed. One remarkable thing was that the name of Abbasid caliphs were mentioned by him in the Friday prayer lectures till 786 AD. Abdur Rahman died in Cordoba on September 30th, 788 AD, and his son Hisham became the new Emir of Spain.
The Arabs brought into Spain 2 things from China, and you consider how far China was, and that Columbus tried to reach China and didn't manage to even several centuries later, but they brought paper and silk, and these did not come to Spain as articles of commerce, but they came to Spain as manufacturing products. They had to come in and bring the silkworm in and get the mulberry tree so the silk could be made in Spain. This is over 9,000 miles. And the same thing happened with paper. And with paper, they didn't make it of wood pulp like today. They made it what was called esparto grass, the kind of grass which began to grow around Valencia. And the result of this was Spain became a manufacturing center. And then another thing that came in from China was gunpowder. And of course, this again came in as a manufacturing item, and it spread up into Europe too. But to me, one of the interesting things is that these things didn't go to France. France is only a few hundred miles north of the border, but they were in Spain for several centuries because the French knew that they could use them. That is a sort of glory that Spanish Islam had.
The art of weaving gained strength in Cordoba, which had 15,000 weavers. Let us meet with a weaver in Granada who is living in the Gypsy Cave and has the machine developed by the Arab Muslims during the Umayyad period. Wool was brought from Soria and Segovia. Spanish merino became famous and was exported to France. The silk industry flourished in Jaén, Granada, Valencia, and Sevilla. The Arab residents introduced the art of carpentry. Ships and boats were also built in Almeria. The Cordoban leather goods were so famous and original, they were known as cordwain in England and cordonnier in France. The supreme art of bookbinding was the most famous, especially of the copies of Quran.
Why no more?
What?
Why Moorish no more?
No more here.
Yeah, why?
Because the king de Fernando go outside the Granada.
Ceramics and pottery made near Valencia and Malaga later became the symbol of Spanish Muslim culture throughout the world. Mosaics and tiles were perfected by Islamic Spain. The glass industry flourished in Cordoba and Almeria. Muslims brought paper to Europe through Spain. The Arab Spaniards excelled in metalwork, especially brass, iron, and steel work. The Toledo sword factory was world famous during the Islamic period of Spain. The first two water clocks made in Europe came from Spain, built by Abu al-Qasim of Toledo. Mining industry was quite strong. Muslim Spain developed the finest agricultural system through efficient irrigation. They brought the system of floodgates from Egypt, water wheels and pumps from Syria. The water wheel of Noria was a significant contribution to irrigation. Due to intermarriages, Muslim Spain became a unique mix of Arab, European, and Moroccan races. The Mosque and University of Cordoba became the center of learning for all of Europe. Christian Spain and Europe had fallen into darkness. Those who wanted to learn and get higher education used to come to Cordoba University. People came from great distances, not only to see the Grand Mosque, but also to visit the city of Cordoba, which was the most advanced city in Europe at that time. In the 10th century, this city was called the Jewel of the World. There were over 200,000 houses in the city, along with 600 mosques and schools, 900 public baths, 50 hospitals, and countless mills for light and heavy industry. Cordoba reached her greatest glory under Abdur Rahman III and with Al-Mansur in the 9th century. The streets were paved in the year 850 AD. The glorious structure in the city was the Grand Mosque, which was continuously expanded for 2 centuries by the succeeding emirs of the Islamic State. In Al-Mansur's time, it covered an area of 742 feet by 472 feet. The exterior showed a battlement wall of brick and stone, with irregular towers and a massive minaret that surpassed in size and beauty all the minarets of the time. It was numbered among the wonders of the world. 19 portals surmounted by horseshoe arches, elegantly carved with floral and geometrical decoration in stone, led into the court with a fountain for washing before prayer. Today, this is known as Patio de los Naranjos, or Orange Tree Court. The mosque had a forest of 1,290 columns, and from these sprang a variety of arches. The wooden ceiling was carved into cartouches, bearing Quranic inscriptions. From the ceilings hung 200 chandeliers holding 7,000 cups of scented oil. The walls were paved with silver and gold. The mihrab, or prayer niche, and the minbar, or pulpit, where the imam led the prayers and delivered the khutbah, showed one of the finest arts in the world. On the minbar, in a jeweled box covered with gold threaded crimson silk, rested the Quran, compiled by Caliph Uthman. This mosque was considered the most beautiful mosque in the world at that time. It was a common saying in the Islamic Spain. When a musician dies at Cordoba and his instruments have to be sold, they were sent to Sevilla. When a rich man died in Sevilla and his library had to be sold, all his books were sent to Cordoba. The royal palace of Al-Zahra, or known as Medina al-Zahra, that was built by Abdur Rahman III in 961 AD, about 3 miles northwest from Cordoba, was lavishly designed and equipped. 1,200 marble columns sustained it. The hall of audience was decorated with marble and gold. It became the residence of Amir and his family. Arab Spaniards introduced musical instruments like the lute, lyre, pandore, flute, reinforced by horn, tambourine, castanets, and drums. The lute was like a mandolin. The large lute was called the kitara. The names guitar and lute are from the Arabic language. The city of Sevilla manufactured the finest musical instruments for accompanying songs. As early as the 7th century, Muslims wrote measurable music where the notation indicated the duration, as well as the pitch of each note. This technique of writing music was unknown to Europe till 1190 AD. Very soon, a unique blend of Arabic rhythm with European melodies began to appear in Spain, and the most delightful music was born. There were Christians living in the Islamic State who adapted the Islamic culture and Arabic language. They were known as Mozarabs or Mustarabin, who developed Spanish music and dances. Haakon II ruled Spain from 961 to 976 AD and gave the highest priority to scholarship and intellectuality. Himself, being a scholar, left the leadership of his army to Muhammad ibn Abi Amir, who was known as Al-Mansur in later years. In 1311 AD, the population of Granada was 200,000, and 199,500 of them were descendants of Christians converted to Islam. Scholars were highly respected in the society. Abu Muhammad Ali ibn Hazm in 1000 AD wrote the earliest book on comparative religions, called the Book of Religions and Sects. Ibrahim al-Zarqali in 1060 AD improved the astronomical instruments and earned an international name. Even Copernicus, 5 centuries later, quoted his treatise on the astrolabe. Spanish scientists demonstrated for the first time the motion of the solar apogee with reference to the stars. Cordoba was in this period the favorite resort of the Europeans for surgical operations, and Abul al-Qasim al-Zahrawi, also known as Abu Qasis, was the most honored surgeon of the time, and his techniques were used for several centuries. Poetry was well regarded, and there were numerous poets. One of the greatest poets was al-Mutamid, the Emir of Sevilla. Islamic culture made Andalus for many centuries an honor to mankind. In 1081 AD, Ibrahim al-Sahadi of Valencia constructed the oldest known celestial globe with 1,015 stars engraved on it. The greatest name in Muslim medicine is Abu Marwan ibn Zuhair of Sevilla, known as Avenzoar in Europe. The Spanish Muslims made Spain the garden country of Europe. Oranges, lemons, olives were introduced by them in Spain, and the Christians received from Muslims words like sugar, syrup, sherbet, jar, azure, arabesque, mattress, sofa, muslin, bazaar, tariff, traffic, magazine, cable, admiral, etc. Arabic scientific terms like algebra, zero, cipher, azimuth, zenith are well known in mathematics. Christians absorbed Islamic literature, science, philosophy, and art. In spite of the prosperity and power that Spain gave to the Muslims, Emir Abdur Rahman III, on his deathbed, left this note: I have now reigned about 50 years in victory or peace. Riches and honors, powers and pleasures have waited on my call. Nor does any earthly blessing appear to have been wanting to my felicity. In this situation, I have diligently numbered the days of pure and genuine happiness which have fallen to my lot. They amount to 14. Oh, man, place not thy confidence in this present world. Such was the Islamic belief of these great rulers of Spain.
After the defeat of King Roderick by Tariq in 711 AD, the patriotic Christians fled towards the northwest part of Spain called the Asturias. There they established their churches and lived almost in isolation. The Muslim Spain and the Christian Spain had a fence running from Coimbra in Portugal through Saragossa and along the Ebro River. While the Muslim Spain flourished in wealth, culture, and knowledge, the Christian Spain fell into poverty and darkness. The Emir of Islamic Spain had stationed along the border a well-trained army who would crush frequent attacks from the Christians, who used to dream that someday they would reconquer the land they lost. These clashes lasted for 500 years, and during these centuries, the Visigoths and their descendants kept their dreams of reconquest alive. Muslim rulers had to be on alert all the time to suppress the attacks from the Christian land. Toledo established a tiny Christian kingdom during the 8th century with its capital at Oviedo. Meanwhile, many Mozarabs moved to the Christian Spain and brought new knowledge from Islamic Spain. During the reign of King Alfonso II around 800 AD, the remains of St. James the Apostle were discovered in a Galician field. At once, Spain became a place of pilgrimage for Europe. The city of Santiago de Compostela grew near the tomb of the saint. Now, the kingdom grew and the capital moved from Oviedo to Leon in the 10th century. Abdur Rahman III with his army went all the way to Pamplona in victory over the Christians and stressed to them the importance of the Islamic Spain. However, the destruction of the Church of St. James the Apostle by Al-Mansur began to open the religious feelings among the Christians against the Muslims, even though there is very little evidence to this thought. The encouragement of pilgrimage to Compostela assisted in diffusing awareness of opportunities in Spain. After 1000 AD, when Taifa kingdoms were formed, Christian Spain found a great financial opportunity from the Muslim kings. The civilization that the Umayyad rule developed in Spain became one of the finest civilizations in the history. For 300 years, the Arabs, Berbers, and local Spaniards lived in unity, peace, and prosperity under the central authority of the Umayyads in Cordoba. For the entire Islamic Spain, there was only one leader at Cordoba. With the growing prosperity and wealth, the strength of belief in Islam began to decline. Even though the government was based on Quran and Sunnah, the people began to philosophize the religion. Meanwhile, an outstanding military figure came to limelight. Al-Mansur, known as Almanzor in the Spanish Christian history, came to power around 978 AD. In 997 AD, he totally destroyed the religious capital of Christian Spain, Santiago de Compostela, and damaged the shrine to St. James. Al-Mansur's real name was Muhammad ibn Abi Amir. However, his destroying of the shrine at Santiago de Compostela might have triggered the Christian antagonism, which later on became the central cause for the Muslim decline. After the death of Al-Mansur in 1002 AD, Muslim Spain fell into chaos with brief reigns and assassinations. The political authority and cultural leadership of Cordoba was destroyed, and now it moved to Toledo, Granada, and Sevilla. The Umayyad leadership finally ended. Toledo declared independence from Cordoba in 1035 AD, and Sevilla had already separated in 1023 AD. City after city followed the examples of Sevilla and Toledo until Andalus disintegrated into 26 independent Muslim kingdoms known as Taifas, ruled by Reyes de Taifas. These petty kingdoms began to fight against one another to secure their properties and wealth, and Islam became a secondary issue. Unity is the source of power. With the central and unified leadership lost, the Muslims in Spain began to lose power. However, it must be noted that the loss of power at this time did not hurt the growth and influence of Muslim culture in Spain. It was so deeply rooted in the society that it could not be separated. The Arabs, the Berbers, the Persians were now Spanish Muslims, and Spain was their homeland. They had grown here in Spain for centuries and had owned lands. They were Spaniards, and the countries of the forefathers were merely past memories. Arabic and Spanish languages were spoken by all people, whether Muslims or non-Muslims. The Taifas opened a great opportunity to the Christians for the Reconquista. These petty Muslim kings had no powerful armies to protect their thrones, power, and wealth. Hence, they took Christian kings as their protecting friends and signed up agreements for annual payments to the Christian kings to protect them from other attacks, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. For example, King Fernando I, by the time of his death in 1065 AD, was extracting annual tributes from the Muslim kings of Toledo, Zaragoza, Sevilla, and Barcelona. These tributes were known as prias. In 1073 AD, Al-Mutadir of Zaragoza was paying Sancho IV annual tribute of 12,000 gold coins called dinars. In return, Sancho promised military help when required. Abd Allah, the king of Granada, paid 10,000 dinars to Alfonso VI annually for military protection. The payments of the Muslim kings for military protection brought prosperity to the Christian kings, and they were able to do things which they could not do before. Now, the Christian Spain began to think about the crusading reconquest of Muslim Spain. They believed that relations between Christians and Muslims were justly hostile, and that Christian warfare against Islam bestowed positive spiritual merit, and Muslims should be driven out of the Spanish land.
Another thing that happened, you've seen, I didn't mention anything about, besides the philosophy, but they were writing books, some books, and also they were singing. I mean, then you get this wine, women, and song idea, that they were having too many wild parties and so on. Their morals had gone down.
It is during the Taifa period a famous personality has been mentioned, and that was the national hero of Spain, El Cid. His name, El Cid, came from the Arabic word leader, and was a title given by the Spanish Muslims to Rodrigo Diaz. El Cid was a Christian. He emerged as an adventurous soldier of genius, who, following his own fortunes, sold his skills to Christians and Muslims alike. In the year 1080 AD, King Alfonso VI re-established Al-Qadir as the Taifa ruler of Toledo. In order to satisfy Alfonso's demand for money, Al-Qadir squeezed his subjects dry by techniques of extortion. When the subjects revolted against him, King of Leon Castile supported the puppet Al-Qadir. Alfonso kept his army permanently in Toledo. Finally, Al-Qadir made a deal with the Christian King Alfonso that if the king made him the ruler of Valencia, he would surrender Toledo to him. King Alfonso laid siege to Toledo in 1084 AD and started an embargo of food and supplies. During the springtime, famine and disease became widespread in the city. The terms of surrender were worked out, and on May 25, 1085, King Alfonso VI, Emperor of Leon and Castile, captured the city of Toledo without bloodshed as agreed upon by the Muslim king Al-Qadir. After 375 years of Islamic rule, Toledo fell to the Christian rule. In 1086 AD, King Alfonso installed Al-Qadir as the ruler of Valencia. Then he called Al-Mutamid of Sevilla to surrender. Next, he sent his representatives to Granada and other Taifa kingdoms for surrender. The fall of Toledo to Christians was a big blow to the Muslim population in Spain. The poets lamented about the loss of Toledo and related this loss to the corruption that prevailed in the society. Wine drinking, philosophizing of Islam, Sufism were the main elements. Muslim Spain was desperately looking for an Islamic leader who could once again revive the Islamic power in Spain. They turned towards the rising power of Yusuf ibn Tashfin of Morocco. Ibn Yassin started an Islamic revivalist movement in the Sahara Desert with the help of a Berber tribe called Lemtuna. Ibn Yassin was an Islamic scholar trained at the Kairouani University in Fez, Morocco. The principles of this movement was to establish true Islam and abolish the several twists given to Islamic life due to philosophizing and interpretations. Ibn Yassin grouped his followers together in a ribat, or military convent. These people were known as Murabids, or also known as Almoravids in the Christian Spanish history. Very soon the Almoravid movement spread all over Morocco, and Ibn Yassin's cousin Yusuf ibn Tashfin founded the city of Marrakesh in 1062 AD. Yusuf then turned towards the north and captured Fez and Tangier. Yusuf became one of the greatest Islamic generals who was fighting for Islam successfully. The Berbers called the success of Almoravid a blessing from Allah. The Taifa situation in Spain was a great concern to Yusuf. However, it was the fall of Toledo which gave a big boost to Yusuf's thrust into Spain. The fall of Toledo had sent a great tremor through all Al-Andalus and filled the inhabitants with fear. The religious leaders of Muslim Spain sent their deputies to Yusuf complaining about the unusual taxation upon the Muslim communities by the Taifa rulers to pay the Christian kings for protection, which was un-Islamic. Yusuf's Islamic army entered Spain and marched towards the north with the intent of reconquering Toledo. In October 1086, near Badajoz, a fierce battle was fought between the army of Alfonso VI and Yusuf's army. Alfonso was severely defeated and crushed. Toledo fell back to Muslim hands again. However, in the process of defeating the Christian forces, Yusuf found out that there were severe conflicts between the Muslim kings of the Taifa states. This disunity was not agreeable to Yusuf. He consulted the great personality Al-Ghazali whether he might depose the Spanish Taifa kings who were not living as good Muslims. Ghazali gave him the permission, and this was according to Quran and Sunnah. Yusuf eliminated one after the other the Taifas, and once again a unified Islamic state came into existence, and Islamic rule was restored. The Almoravids ruled Andalus as part of their huge Islamic state till 1145 AD. They recaptured the territories that were lost to the Christians. Unfortunately, after Yusuf, the successors fell into luxuries and lost interest in the righteous rule. Once again, corruption grew. Courage yielded to money as the standard of excellence. Women won out by their grace and charms. Roads became unsafe. Wealth declined. The Catholic kings once again seized the opportunity and raided Cordoba, Sevilla, and other cities. However, Muslim Brotherhood came forward again from Morocco. This time, they were Muwahids. In 1121 AD, a person in Morocco, Abdullah ibn Tumart, proclaimed himself as the promised Mahdi in the Shia faith and gathered great numbers of followers. He demanded a return to simplicity of life and creed. His followers were known as Almohads, whose principle was Tawheed, meaning unity of God. The immense Islamic state of Almohads extended from Morocco to Spain under one leadership, and once again prosperity, discipline, culture, art, and peace returned to Andalusia. Abu Yusuf Yaqub in 1190 AD burned all the philosophy books. It is during his period the great Mosque of Sevilla was built. What a beautiful structure this is. Today, only one gate of this mosque remains. You may see the intricate carvings on this door, and also the feminine art. My heart bleeds when I see these marvels of art destroyed. In 1196 AD, the great architect Jabir raised the magnificent minaret of the Sevilla Mosque, known to us today as the Giralda Tower. There is no Sevilla without this minaret. Of course, the Grand Mosque was torn down by the Christians and was replaced by the cathedral, but the minaret was left alone due to its beauty and art. The Christians called it Giralda Tower. The very concept of Sevilla centers around the Giralda Tower. During the Muslim period, they would call for Islamic prayer 5 times a day. When I look at this great minaret, the adhan rings in my ears. There is the caller of prayer inviting people to pray Allah and accept Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the messenger of Allah. This is the way it was during the Islamic Spain. This minaret will stand here another 1,000 years, reminding the future generations the glory of the Islamic civilization in Spain. The first 230 feet are the original minaret, and the remaining 82 feet are the Christian supplement built in 1568 AD. Today, at the top of this minaret, we hear the church bells ring every evening. According to Islamic tradition, bells are not allowed in the mosque. Only human voice calls for prayer. The Hassan Tower in Rabat, Morocco, is built by the same engineers at the same time, as well as the one in Marrakesh. The cities profited from the economical developments. The Andalusian thinkers like Ibn Tufail and Averroes were born during this period. The Almohads were enthusiastic builders. They built for defense, mighty walls surrounding their cities. The forts at Rabat, Morocco are good examples of their system.
And when you think of existentialism in this century, here was Ibn Bajjah in Spain, from Zaragoza up in the northeast, explaining about how you do this. Now the next man I like is a man called Ibn Tufail. And Ibn Tufail was a doctor, medical doctor. He was from a place called Guadalete, east of Granada, and he wrote a book called Hay Ibn Yaqdhan, which means alive son of alert. And what happened with him was, he wrote this thing about, it's an early Robinson Crusoe, and actually Defoe in England read the book and wrote Robinson Crusoe from it. And it's about a little boy who was put on a desert island and has to learn everything by himself. In other words, a very complex philosophical idea, but how does a little boy learn to live in the world? And he lived alone, again like Ibn Bajjah's man who wants to live alone, but he lived alone. And eventually he met a man. He was, they say the original story started in Asia, in India probably, and that he was sent to Ceylon to live. But with Ibn Tufail, he was sent to the Canary Islands probably. And he did, when he met a man, when he got old enough, he went through different periods of his history and he learned the facts of life. And he met another man who came there from another island as a missionary, and they found out that between them.
In Sevilla, you will find the great beauty Torre del Oro, or Tower of Gold, that guarded the Guadalquivir River. This structure, though very simple, offers the most beautiful skyline to Sevilla, at once reminding the glorious Muslim art, which later on became the integral part of Spanish culture. Numerous poets and singers have written and sung songs about these monuments. Yaqub's son al-Nasir cared for neither religion nor philosophy, neglected government, specialized in pleasure and luxury. The belief in Tawheed was gone, and the zeal to die for Islam had vanished. The racial and class systems prevailed. Disunity became a character of the Muslim society, and Almohad Spain broke into small and independent states. Al-Nasir was severely defeated by the unified Christian forces at Las Navas de Toloso in 1212 AD. The rival Muslim kings sought Christian help against one another to satisfy their own revenges and jealousies. In 1236 AD, Ferdinand III of Castile and Leon captured the great Muslim capital Cordoba without much resistance. In 1248, the great city of Sevilla fell. After more than 500 years of Islamic rule, the Christian rule came back to these cities. Only one Taifa kingdom survived, and that was Granada. The defeated and humiliated Muslims took refuge in Granada, where many still remained in the conquered lands.
At the siege of Jaén in 1246 AD by the Christians, the Muslim ruler Ibn al-Hamar approached Ferdinand III and offered collaboration in the siege of another Muslim kingdom, Sevilla, and also agreed to pay annual money tribute to Ferdinand. This was the main reason why Granada was left untouched by the Christians under the banner of Nasrid dynasty. Hence, with the exception of Granada, the entire Iberian Peninsula came under the control of Christian rule, with a significant Muslim population as their subjects, who were called Mudahars. The Muslim community was the most advanced community at this time. They were prosperous in their profession of agriculture in Valencia and Aragon. An estimated 350,000 Muslim Spaniards migrated to Granada after the Christians conquered Sevilla, Valencia, and Cadiz. During the reign of Muhammad V, between 1354 to 1391 AD, Granada reached its splendor in wealth, art, literature, agriculture, sciences, industry, and culture. The world-famous scholars existed in Granada, like Ibn Khaldun, whose books of philosophy were later translated into world languages. Ibn Khatib and many other intellectuals brought honor to the history of Granada. But the most remarkable of all the accomplishments is the Alhambra Palace, where the Muslim rulers used to live and perform their duties. The delicate art, the intricate engravings, the super skills of the artists, the layout, the elegance, and the glory of the Alhambra Palace in Granada is the greatest example of Islamic art in the Western Hemisphere, just as the Taj Mahal is in India. The more you look into these rooms and halls, the more you like to see them. There is a never-ending desire to see again and again. You may see the Quranic ayahs inscribed in a grand way. The ceilings are magnificently carved. In 1248 AD, Muhammad ibn al-Hamar ordered the construction of Alhambra Palace on the top of the hill in Granada. The Amir built the great outer walls and the earliest of its palaces, and left everywhere his modest motto, "There is no conqueror but Allah." In the main courtyard, the Patio de los Leones, or the Court of the Lions, a dozen marble lions guard a majestic alabaster fountain. The Alhambra Palace, with picturesque ensemble of gardens, fountains, balconies, suggests the climax of Muslim art in Spain. There is no Spain without Alhambra Palace, and there is no Alhambra Palace without Spain. The Alhambra, the most beautiful, the Kingdom of Granada, the only palace of refuge for Muslims in Spain, lasted for 250 years approximately, and Granada was like the Cordoba of Islamic Spain.
Albofaz en aquel rey, Aína se fue guisando, los alfaquíes de la ley, la su secta predicando. Decían, nuestro profeta Mahoma, el nuestro padre, ayuda la ley de Meca, casa santa, nuestra madre. Nuestro gozo y nuestro bien, Señor de paz y salud, el rey Alí Albofazen, en él pongas tu virtud. Tu ley sea ensalzada y la fe de los romanos hoy sea desbaratada.
The bulk of the Muslim population continued to live in the Christian-controlled lands because there were Spaniards, and this was their land for generations. Due to intermarriages for centuries, it was difficult to classify them according to their ancestral origins. Of course, they were a unique mixture of European, Arab, Berber, Persian origins. They produced a culture very fascinating and enchanting. The Muslim population was the backbone of Spain in industry and agriculture, and the economy depended upon their hard work. However, under the Christian rule, they became second-class citizens. They were nicknamed as Moors by the Christians in order to isolate them and segregate them from the mainstream. They were proclaimed to be people from Morocco as Moors, even though they lived in Spain for more than 500 years at the time of the Kingdom of Granada, and had added glorious pages to the history of Spain as the ruling class. The Muslims now became the cultivators and artisans. Jews were technicians and businessmen, whereas the Christians were warriors and landlords. Muslims were further reduced to servants and laborers. They were compelled to live outside the city. Many Muslims and Jews were forced to convert to Christianity, and they were called conversos. Anyway, on October 19, 1469 AD, Princess Isabella of Castile married Prince Ferdinand, the heir crown of Aragon. Marriage brought unity to the major part of Christian Spain and was a turning point in the Spanish history. The joint sovereignty of the Catholic monarchs issued the danger signal to the only Muslim stronghold, Granada. In April 1491 AD, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand brought 50,000 soldiers to Granada and resolved not to return till Granada was captured. It was a crusade for them. The Emir of Granada, Muhammad XI, known as Abu Abdullah, or Boabdil in the Spanish history, called a meeting in the great Alhambra Palace. The clouds of dust raised by the Christian horsemen could be seen from the windows when the leaders of the kingdom were divided in their opinions. Some said surrender, but Musa said, Allahu Akbar, this is the time to enter Allah's paradise. Let us fight and die for the sake of Allah and for the sake of our dignity and honor. Musa gained support from the people. The chief threw open the gates and single combat started. A few of the best Christian warriors were slain by Musa. However, during one dark night, Hernando Perez de Pulgar, with a few soldiers, entered the Alhambra through a postern gate and galloped till he came to the main mosque, which he dedicated to the Blessed Virgin and nailed a label on the door with the words, Ave Maria. The civilized people cried at the religious hatred. The Muslims shut the doors again and there was no food. Meanwhile, the Catholic king built a besieging city in 80 days and called it Santa Fe. The famine started within the walls of Alhambra, while the people of Granada now appealed to Boabdil to negotiate terms with the Christian king. But Musa did not join the negotiations. Instead, he came out alone and began fighting till he was slain. His last words were, "There is no God but Allah. Muhammad is the messenger of Allah." On November 25, 1491 AD, the Emir of Granada, Boabdil, signed the Act of Capitulation, and the term for truce was fixed. He stood in his palace of the Alhambra and looked through the window of his lavishly decorated room, hoping that the Muslim brothers from Egypt or Turkey were marching fast to help save the Islamic prestige in Spain. But they never came. A rule of 750 years, a culture which had become the pride and honor of mankind, was about to breathe its last on the soil of Spain. Boabdil's mother stood beside him in tears and might have said, "My son, you must fight like a Muslim soldier and defend yourself in the name of Allah and die. Remember how Tariq defeated 70,000 Christian soldiers with only 7,000 Muslim soldiers. Remember the great culture and civilization that our forefathers established with Islamic character. Today we are helpless. The typhus ruined the Muslim dignity in this land of Andalus. The rope of Islamic unity has broken into pieces." She was trembling with frustration. Anyway, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella promised full freedom of religion to all people as a condition of surrender. Famine had widely spread. On January 2, 1492 AD, Boabdil and his 50 cavaliers rode through the gates of Alhambra and to the banks of the river Genil, where King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had been waiting. Boabdil handed over the keys of the city, and shortly afterwards a great silver cross appeared in the Alhambra. The spot where Boabdil took his last look at his city bears to this day the name of El Último Suspiro del Moro, which means the last sigh of the Moor. Such was the end of the great Spanish Muslim power. The Christian celebration of the conquest of Granada started on a grand scale. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand received homage from the people in the great Alhambra Palace. Among those present there stood a person called Christopher Columbus, along with several Muslim and Christian sailor friends. He had the dream of finding a new ocean route to India and the Orient. He had been trying to get financial support for this adventure for years. But this was an opportune time when the conquest of Granada brought supreme power to the monarchs in Spain. Columbus got the permission from Queen Isabella to spread Catholicism in the lands he would be visiting. Columbus did not know that he was destined to discover a new world, where after some time, freedom of religion and human dignity would be the character. Columbus started his voyage with 90 sailors. Maybe a few were Muslims. Columbus discovered America on October 12, 1492. When he landed on the soil of America, he had with him 750 years of Islamic heritage from Spain.
Perdón, Dios mío, Candelaria mía de mi corazón.
Cardinal Francisco Ximénez de Cisneros, who was the confessor of Queen Isabella and the founder of the University of Alcalá, or the University of Madrid, determined to destroy the Islamic faith from Spain. He strongly believed that non-Christian souls must be saved through force, if necessary, by converting them to Christianity. In 1499 AD, 7 years after the fall of Granada, the Inquisition General Ximénez came to Granada and compelled the Muslims to baptize by forcing water on them. The Muslims would wipe out the water from their foreheads, and when they arrived at their homes, they would read the Quran secretly and live in fear of being tortured by the authorities. Ximénez ordered all Arabic books, Arabic manuscripts, and all forms of Arabic writings to be brought out and piled in the street. He then selected 300 Arabic books on medical sciences in which the Muslims had excelled and saved them for his university. He then burned all other Arabic books, thousands of them, irrespective of their values or religious significance. As the smoke of these great treasure of knowledge rose upwards, the Muslims saw a grim warning for themselves. Bishop Talavera and Captain General of Granada, Tendilla, reminded Ximénez the Treaty of Granada between the Muslim king and Queen Isabella. Ximenes did not honor the treaty. For Ximenes, with his unusual religious zeal, eloquency, and honesty in what he did to the Muslims, impressed the monarch so highly that they stopped blaming him. He began to advise them that the Muslims must be tortured and punished because they were infidels. He said that the way to create an all-Catholic Spain was to baptize the Muslims or send them into exile. Many Muslims began to leave Spain, and approximately 50,000 became forced Christians, and they were called Moriscos by the Christian Spaniards. When the news of what happened in Granada reached the numerous Muslim villages in Alpujarras, they formed an army to fight the Christian lords for freedom of religion. Ferdinand himself came and killed the helpless Muslims of Spanish lands. They finally asked for peace, which was given to those who were baptized, and the others were thrown out of the country. For 8 centuries, Spain had been their homeland along with local Europeans who had converted to Islam. But now, because of their religion, they had to leave their homeland and families and go someplace else. This was so hard on these people, a great violation of human rights in the name of Christianity. In 1502 AD, Isabella and Ferdinand issued a pragmatica, which declared that it was the duty of all Castilians to drive enemies of Christianity from the land, and all Muslims who had not received baptism and who lived in the Kingdom of Castile and Leon must leave the country. No male over the age of 14 must stay, nor must females over the age of 12. They could sell their property but could not take silver and gold from the country. The Moriscos, were they really Christians in their hearts? The answer is no. Their faith in Allah and the Prophet remained in their hearts, but to the outside world they had to act like Christians. The Inquisition confiscated the properties of Spanish Muslims arbitrarily and forced many to wear the San Benito, a ludicrous Halloween costume, for life. Honorable Muslim women and children were sold as slaves like Lenore in Granada. Same procedures were followed in Malaga. The religious hatred ruined the Spanish literature, economy, and intellectuality. The last Spanish Muslim writers, known as Alhambrado writers, expressed their agony of oppression in the form of poems and songs for the children.
Alá dio lugar que los moros de este reino, con tantas persecuciones, sean castigados y presos, perdiendo los libros sagrados, no quedando rastro de ellos. Los sabios acabados, cuáles muertos, cuáles presos. La Inquisición desplegada con grandes fuerzas y apremios, haciendo con gran rigor crueldades y desafueros, que casi por todas partes hacía temblar el suelo. Aquí prenden y allí prenden a los bautizados nuevos, cargándoles cada día galeras, tormento y fuego, con otras adversaciones que a solo Alá es el secreto.
In 1525, Charles I of Spain ordered all Muslims in Aragon to become Christians. In Albaycin, where most of the Muslims lived, the women used to whisper the name of Allah and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, into the ears of the newborn babies, even though there was a ban on all Islamic practices in Arabic language. The name of a lady, Nosita Calderon, is well known, who defied this ban. The Mudahars of Toledo were ordered to leave the country. These people were Muslims who did not convert. They were jailed and tortured for refusing to drink wine and eat pork.
Allah. Allah the merciful. Allah the all-powerful. Allah the compassionate. Please, hear my prayers.
There was another side to these horrible events. The Muslim entertainment systems like the Zambra parties and flamenco dancing styles and singing were being picked up by the gypsies for their livelihood. The flamenco and the zambra are the very unique products of Arabic and European musical and dancing styles which were refined and developed. But now they were banned because of their Muslim influence. These gypsies began to live later on in caves near Granada, and flamenco became their source of living. The songs and music which accompany the flamenco dances are sad and represent the harassments, tortures, family separations, oppressions that the Spanish Muslims suffered at the hands of the Christian Church. These songs and voices have been communicating to me since my childhood those miseries of separation that the Spanish Muslims had to endure. Flamenco dance perhaps is the most graceful dance that I have seen, and it brings you the glimpses of Muslim culture. We read about Mancebo de Arevalo, or a young man from Arevalo near Madrid, who in those days tried to go to Mecca for pilgrimage. He probably achieved his dream by secretly escaping through Aragon, southern France, Italy, and then by a ship from Genoa or Venice. The Inquisition killed the upper-class Muslims and their leadership. Only the artisans, builders, and farmers were left. The numerous mosques around Ebro and Jalón valleys were converted to churches, and idol worship was introduced in these mosques, where for centuries the one and only one God was worshipped with Islamic prayers. It was 1609 AD. Hundreds of Muslims and Protestants were burned at the stake all up the east coast of Spain, or its Levante. The Inquisition was relentless in its holiness under King Philip II and his priestly advisors who followed the decrees of the Council of Trent. Muslims were disarmed and all able-bodied men were hanged on the gallows, burned at the stake, and banned to the galleys. A great Spanish Muslim hero known as Ibn Humayya, Fernando de Valor in Spanish, rebelled and fought bravely. He was hanged in 1569 AD. In 1570 AD, the expulsion of all Moriscos from Granada was decreed. Pedro de Deza hunted them down brutally. Those Moriscos who remained had to leave their doors and windows open on Fridays and Islamic feast days just in case they prayed to Allah in the Islamic manner. The Islamic-style marriages were banned and no Arabic was allowed to be spoken or written. In 1598 AD, Philip III became the King of Spain, and it was during this time that the event occurred which destroyed the prosperity of Spain. That was the final expulsion of Spanish Muslims from Spain. Moriscos who did not confess under torture and could not therefore be condemned to the stake were punished with whippings and fines. Hundreds of Moriscos were capable of bearing the tortures and survived. May Allah bless them. The Muslims once again raised about 100,000 fighting men and hoped to get help from Morocco. Don John, the half-brother of Philip II, butchered the Muslims with utmost cruelty, and after the Battle of Gilira, 2,000 Muslims were gathered in a square and killed. Their women and children got the same treatment. The Pope hailed Don John as the champion of Christianity, and Philip thanked Our Lady of Guadalupe for the victory. In 1569 AD, Spanish Muslims were divided into several groups, their hands tied together with ropes, and marched off under guard. This plan was implemented by Pedro de Deza of the Supreme Council. On the road to the north, many of these Muslims died of starvation, killed by robbers, and the others were taken as slaves. This method was applied to town after town. In 1609 AD, it was decided to banish all Moriscos from Spain forever, beginning with the district of Valencia. King Philip III and Prime Minister Duke of Lerma were the principal architects of this plan. Fray Jaime Bleda joined the team. Bleda actually favored a general massacre of Spanish Muslims. Many Muslims now escaped to Tunis in very helpless conditions. 40,000 Muslim children were retained in Valencia to be Christianized while their parents were deported. The expulsion from Aragon and Catalonia took place between 1609 to 1610 AD. All Muslims fled to the Middle East, France, North Africa, and many were forced to go to Spanish colonies like Mexico, Central America, as Moriscos. Children whose fathers were old Christians could stay. If the mother was a Morisco, she could stay. A Morisco father would not stay. The splitting of families produced a great anguish among the Muslims. These Muslims felt the warmth of the Islamic faith, which was more comfortable than their homes and wealth in Andalusia. These great people of faith are a pride to the Islamic history. By 1615 AD, the expulsion of Muslims from all of Spain was completely carried out. It is estimated in the historical records that as high as 3 million Spanish Muslims were expelled from Spain. This great exodus brought suffering to Spanish Muslims. Thousands died on their way to countries like Morocco and Tunisia. Their mistake, according to the Catholic Church, was they believed in one and only one God, and Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as his last messenger. Inquisition, of course, created an all-Catholic Spain, but the country lost its prosperity by driving away the most valuable section of its population. The rich agricultural country became a desert. The system of irrigation was neglected. Ruined farmhouses appeared everywhere with barnlands. The Spanish authorities felt that they wiped out Islam and Muslims from the surface of Spain forever. However, the culture, art, and knowledge left by the Spanish Muslims remained in the hearts of future generations.
The church, according to its own theories, can't kill people, can't execute them. So they turned them over to the civil authority, but they said, but don't spill their blood. In other words, don't chop off their head or anything like that. So they burned them at the stake because there's no bloodshed. Now you can fancy what sort of a death that would be. And this happened not in Granada. This happened all over Spain, but especially in the northeastern area by Valencia and Zaragoza up the east coast. And there were thousands, literally thousands. There's a Quaker historian called Henry Lee, and he got interested in the Inquisition, and he wrote a series of books on the Inquisition in Europe and then in Spain. And the one he wrote that I like very much is called the Moriscos in Spain, because he tells, now these Muslims are called Moriscos, which means dirty little Moors or something. It's just an ugly name, which means they were second-class citizens. They had no protection from the police or from anything, or, as I said, from busybody neighbors. And they calculate, Lee has, there's figures of how many hundreds and thousands of people were burned at the stake. And if you consider that made Spain into a civilized country, or Christian Spain in a civilized country, just go and do your mathematics and you'll find out what it was. Now, there's one thing that I often like to do. There was a Guatemalan poet who was born at the end of the 18th century, in other words, about 200 years ago, in Guatemala, and he was a cripple. He'd fallen out of a tree when he's trying to pick some plums, when he's a boy, and he broke his leg and it was never set right. So he became what we would call, I guess, a secretary in a newspaper office, and they caught him with some French books. And the thing that makes me kind of sad, his name was Simón Pergaño y Villegas, and I always called him up because it can be documented. You can say what happened to him. But he was picked up by the Inquisition in Guatemala. His books, which they didn't approve of, and his own furniture, he just lived in the quarters, was sold over his head to pay for his keep in jail. And finally he was convicted, and he was still in jail, but they shipped him off to Cuba, and the rest of his life he was a printer's devil. He couldn't do anything much. I mean, he was an editor. He was fair education, and he was a good poet. But his life as a poet was completely killed. And if you think of what happened to the Muslims in 16th century Spain, it was much of the same thing. Now, this went on, as I said, from 1499 till 1609, for 110 years. And then King Philip III just decided he, by that time, had no Muslims. They were all disaffected. I mean, if you're being hit in the head all the time, you're not going to say you like it. And that's exactly what happened to the Muslims for over 100 years in Spain. They rose up 2 times in the 1520s, especially around Valencia, and then in the late 1568 and 9 in Granada. They couldn't take what was being done to them. That's literally. Their women were sold as slaves. I mean, what does in any society, if you're selling women as slaves, what are you going to use them for? And this is the way they abused women. The children were taken from their parents. When they were expelled, they weren't allowed to take their children. And in Valencia and different cities, different ports, these poor kids would be picked up and shipped off, and you can fancy what happened to them. They became house servants or worse. And especially the boys were picked up by priests. Now, priests don't marry. So what did they do with the boys? They said they were going to teach them catechism. Catechism? I mean, when you read this, not from a Catholic point of view, you read this from the Muslim point of view, you begin to realize that Spain killed itself. And what really happened to Spain was it blocked out its intellectuals. They were afraid to do anything. And I could go into different stories like Lazarillo de Tormes. This is in the 1530s. We don't know yet who wrote it, but you know that the person who wrote it did not like the government or the church.
Maria, thank you very much for meeting you in Spain, in Granada. Can you tell something about what you know about the history of Granada, the Muslim history, the Arab history, and the Christian history, and the Jewish history? What do you know about?
Well, I can tell you that the Arabs, they live here for 800 years. And now the Granadina people, we believe that we have less blood from the Arab, also from the Jews. You can see the faces in Spain. If you watch the faces in Granada, they are dark, black eyes, like Arabs, even Jews, the nose.
Right.
And also there are less things like they were 800 years before. For example, the weight or... Sorry, I can explain myself too well.
Oh, you can speak in Spanish. No problem.
La agricultura, la forma de regadío, es la misma que hace 800 años.
Oh. Well, are there in Spain, in Granada, are there people who are Arabs before and then converted to Christian?
I don't understand what you mean.
So, in Granada, are there people who are once upon a time before were the Arabs, Arab Muslim, were Islamic?
Yes.
And they changed to Christianity?
Yes.
There are now.
I think it was not very good, but I believe they changed to Christian. Last of them, they become Christians. Maybe in their house they had the same culture, but outdoors they had to become Christians.
Oh, is that right? Even today? Now?
No, not to, no. Now they are Arabs, and they are here. Lots of them. Also, they want to make mezquita.
Mezquita. Right.
And it's the oldest neighborhood in town, named Albaicin, which I think means something in Arab. And they are less Islamic people over there.
But before, the Islamic people became Christians, but at home they were Islamic.
Sure. Before.
In my childhood in India, I was attracted by the Spanish musical styles. A group of music directors from the Bombay movie industry introduced Spanish musical moods and rhythms into their songs, carefully mixed with the Indian styles. The Spanish part of the melodies and orchestra touched my heart, and I began to feel as if these sounds were giving me a message of a glorious civilization which was tragically extinguished. The music had a certain sadness, anxiety, dignity, brilliance, and of course the Muslim Arabic flavor. And today I am walking on the streets of Tetuan, a small city in northern Morocco, with my dream of Spanish Muslims who were finally forced out of Spain. These people left their homeland of Spain, left their valuable possessions, their wealth, their homes, and their land, and decided to endure hardships and separation from their own dear children for the sake of their Islamic faith. A few of them came to this city of Tetuan in Morocco and settled down here, and were called the Andalusians. Today I am walking in the streets of the old town in search of the Andalusians, a curiosity which has remained in my mind since my childhood. These refugees, almost 400 years back, built a new life for themselves in Tetuan and other places in Morocco and Tunisia, and today they are still known as Andalusians. A learned man explained a few things in the history.
Los moriscos vinieron aquí en 500 a 1600, vinieron desde Valencia y ha sido totalidad, según los escritores, de unos 130.000 moriscos que vinieron alrededor desde Puerta Septa hasta la puerta de Libia. Pasaron por Marruecos, Argelia, Túnez, y also Libya also. Yes, sir.
Speaking Spanish, no problem.
También estuvieron en Libia y a más filtraron en todo el Mediterráneo y algunos filtraron también en el sur, por ejemplo en Saleh y Rabat. Llegaron aquí, fueron los que construyeron esta ciudad que se llama Tetuán. Quedaron bastante moriscos aquí. Para saber las casas de los moriscos todavía hay que entrar en la Madina y tenemos un símbolo de todas las casas de los moriscos. Un símbolo de
To my great pleasure and excitement, I met a descendant of an Andalusian family who was forced out of Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. Here he is. Let us talk to him.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. My name is Zahir Ahmed from Los Angeles, California. I'm here in Tetuan, in Morocco.
Welcome.
And brother, please tell me your name if you want.
My name is Abdul Qadir Riyan.
Brother, your grandparents, did they come from Spain?
أجداد ديالك جاو من إسبانيا من أندلسيا.
Podemos decir que, por ejemplo, nuestros abuelos han venido de España, pero hay mucho tiempo que han venido de. Entonces, con el tiempo, podemos decir que se han vuelto que son marroquíes.
Sí. That's his grandparents. They are coming from Spain, from the Andalusia. With a lot of years, they are now more Moroccans. I mean, they have forget the tradition, the old tradition of Spain.
Do you know any stories that your grandparents told you about why they came from Andalusia to a place called Tetuan?
في الحقيقة يعني ربما إذا رجعنا لهناك لعدة أسباب لا يمكن أن نقول بأن هناك سبب واحد مباشر، وأنها تعلقت بعدة أسباب وبعدة مشاكل التي عاشوها المسلمين في الأندلس. فالمسلمون يعني عاشوا 12 قرن في الأندلس، فكانوا متمسكين بالدين، متوحدين، يعيشون وحدة روحانية، وحدة القلوب، وحدة العرب ووحدة المسلمين في آن واحد. فلما هم يعني تدريجيا يعني اليهود والنصارى يعني استعملوا خطط عشان يفشلوا المسلمين في الأندلس، فدخلوا من باب الشهوة والغنى والترف والملاهي. فهذه هي الأسباب التي كانت مباشرة. فالمسلمين لما إن الإنسان لا يطغى أن رآه استغنى، يعني لما تزول الأمور اللي هي ضرورية يتخلوا عن الدين. يعني لما دخل الشيطان واستحوذ عليهم تخلوا عن مبادئهم، يعني بتشبثهم بالرقص والغنى والخمر. فهم دخلوا من هذا الباب. يعني لو كانوا دخلوا من باب القوة ما استطاعوا، لكن استطاعوا أن يدخلوا من باب آخر اللي هو أقوى من القوة. فدخلوا من باب نافذة الزنا، نافذة الشهوة، نافذة تعطش النفس للذة ولعدة أمور. يعني لا يمكن أن نحصر هذه الأسباب في وقت ضيق.
The Spanish Inquisition ended 900 years of active Islamic life, which had added the most glorious pages to the history of Spain. Since 1610 AD to the 20th century, Islam and Muslims were illegal, and there was complete silence. Numerous historians and poets have shed their tears for what little they knew about the rise and fall of the Spanish Muslims. The great poet Iqbal of Pakistan wrote a remarkable poem about Cordoba Mosque in this century. His heart was bleeding at the destruction of this great civilization when he wrote the poem. The monuments of Sevilla, Cordoba, Granada attract millions of tourists to visit Spain. These monuments are the silent historians of the Spanish Muslims. They are also a witness to the tragic expulsion of the Muslims from their homeland of Spain, a severe violation of human rights. O Allah, bless those who sacrificed everything for the sake of Islam. Bless those who endured the tortures and died while fighting to preserve the faith. Amen.